right, if we are gonna potentially be seeing nation state demand in the next couple of years, it's like, what's the next cycle after that, right? I think I've always been fascinated by money as people get over leveraged, right? Some people will get knocked out. If we see credit collapse, Bitcoin could crash down a bit, and then we know the government will come in and provide.
Hi everyone, this is Jack Alwell with another money episode. Today we have very special guest Ian Kirk from Learn About Bit. He's the creator of the YouTube channel Learn About Bit. So hopefully you'll check him out. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jack. Definitely stoked to be here and then just talk a little bit about Bitcoin. It's always a good time, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, I saw some of your videos and we decided to hop on a call. So this will be fun. So before we get into Bitcoin, I do like to ask every guest, what was your relationship like with money growing up?
I think I've always been fascinated by money, but things definitely things definitely changed a lot for me once I found out about Bitcoin and started learning about it. Just because it just kind of changed the way I think about money and time preference and saving for the future. But I would say, like, growing up, I really didn't I mean, I was always fascinated by money and I was always trying to find ways to, like, make money, whether it was, like, selling something or trying to buy something and sell it at a higher price on eBay or something like that. So I always just had, like, a natural, like, interest in money and just kind of, like, hustling, I guess. Um, but I would say when I was younger, I really wasn't great at saving money, right? I would make money, and then it was like, "Alright, I just made $500, let's go spend $500," you know? So I know I just really didn't think about saving money for the future as much. I just thought about, what can I do right now to have fun with this money? And I think, around the time when I graduated college and I kind of like fell into Bitcoin, it really kind of changed my mindset on money completely.
So, can you walk us through your mindset? So what year are you out of college?
I graduated college in 2019, and
Uh,
yeah, like, I feel like in college, I really enjoyed college. It was a great time, um, but I think, in college, I just, like, whenever I made money, I just thought, it would be fun, like, what can we spend this money on, to enjoy life right now. I wasn't really thinking for the future. So yeah, I think a lot of people have that mindset, and once I just wasn't very frugal, I don't think. I just didn't really have that long-term mindset. I just was thinking about what can I spend this money like, let's go out to a nice dinner, let's go have some fun, you know. Oh, let's plan a trip and go somewhere. Um, and I'm glad I kind of switched my perspective from that to more of like a frugal perspective and a saver's perspective. I think it's still good to spend money and enjoy your life, but I think, it's also really good to be thinking about the future and have some frugality and be saving.
do you think so? And at what point did you actually learn about Bitcoin?
So I learned about it probably when a lot of people learned about it in around 2020. I remember in college, I had heard people mentioning it around 2017, probably when it went through that big run up to around like $17,000 or $20,000. I just like I remember I'd be at like a party or somewhere and I'd hear somebody like talking about Bitcoin, didn't really understand what it was or know anything about it. But in 2020, when we got all that COVID spending and we just saw really all assets take off, and when Bitcoin went on that run from wherever it was at up to 60, $70,000, that's what really caught my eye and made me think, okay, maybe something's going on here that I should be paying attention to.
Uh-huh. How did you first get acquainted with Bitcoin? Were there certain books that you read that really caught your eye? Was it a certain person on a podcast that you listened to? How did you kind of engulf yourself in the Bitcoin world?
I think the Bitcoin community is really great. I'm sure you know. I think I saw on your channel you had some cool guests on that I follow. Um, but I think just all the people in this space are there's a lot of very intelligent people that I've been fortunate enough to kind of, find their channel, whether it be somebody like James Lavish or Preston Pish, Samson Mao, some of these people who really Jack Mallers, these people who really have a good fundamental understanding of Bitcoin and money and are just really good at breaking it down. So I think once I kind of got I think my first step was I started buying Bitcoin, started getting a little bit of it, and the more you know, I bought, the more I wanted to learn about it, checking out people's YouTubes. I eventually read the Bitcoin Standard, which is, I know for a lot of people, kind of like that eye-opening moment. I anyone who I come across who is like, "I don't get Bitcoin. I wanna understand it." I tell them, "You should take the time and read this book because it's a really not only is it gonna teach you about Bitcoin, but it's just a really good, book about money and just understanding what money is, the evolution of money, and how it makes sense that we could be going to this place where we're going to move into this, decentralized internet money, right? As we move into this internet world. So, yeah, I would say a combination of just listening to people in the Bitcoin space and then reading books like The Bitcoin Standard. Lynn Alden's one of my favorite people in this whole sort of Bitcoin and investing space. She wrote a great book. Have you read Broken Money?
I have not read her book yet.
So
Also, big fan of Lynn.
yeah, that was definitely another great book that I enjoyed reading. So yeah, just been continuing to try to learn more about Bitcoin and money in general and economics. Yeah,
Cool. Yeah, I would totally echo the Bitcoin Standard and the second book, Fiat Standard, I liked a lot too. And in Fiat Standard, it was kind of like blowing my mind how there's a lot of things we don't really think about that are affected because of the money, like our architecture, like our food, all these things. And I actually had the Fiat food guy on my channel a while ago, Matt Leashock, I think. Um, he works with Safe, so okay, cool. Um,
so yes. I'm actually reading that book right now, and I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, it's yeah, I enjoy just, like, how he connects money to all these things like
yep,
food and yeah, it's great.
yep, yep. So, so if someone were to ask you, like, do you consider yourself what they're calling like a Bitcoin maximalist?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Um,
So, uh-huh.
yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So, and I guess in your words, like, how do you actually view like what a Bitcoin maximalist is for the listeners? Maybe they've never heard that term.
That's a good question. I don't know if I could really, like, put a definition to I guess what I would say a Bitcoin maximalist is someone who is, like, fully convicted in Bitcoin, right? I mean, I think just from learning about Bitcoin, it's taught me that the broken money is really, like, the one of the most fundamental problems that we have in the world, and, right, when I think about investing for the future and trying to build wealth for the future, and I see, right, the money is the fundamental problem. I think that's why, right, that's a main reason why so many people, put all their money into stocks, real estate, really just anything that's not fiat. So I believe, right, if you fix the money and you have a good fundamental money, with a finite supply like Bitcoin, that people are gonna move, right? They've been moving out of the money and into all these assets. I think that they're gonna move back into the money. If the money actually fills its role as a store of value, then I think people are gonna be incentivized to just stay in the money unless they can find another investment that's gonna outperform it. And looking at Bitcoin right now, around a $2 trillion market cap, I still think that when we look at all the money out there, um, right, it has a lot more to eat into. So I think right now, Bitcoin has a lot of upside, like more than pretty much most other investments. Um, and I think it's gonna demonetize other investment, real estate, stocks. I think people are gonna move out of those investments and back into the money. So, I just think there's no better place to be right now.
Uh, I mean, I will say firsthand, I am trying to sell one of my rentals right now to buy more Bitcoin. So I got into real estate first and starting to see some issues. So yeah, I echo that. Um so to the like the one thought I've been having a lot, and I don't know if you even have a thought on this, but I'm just curious. So like when I think of a lot of the Bitcoin maximalists, it's like I'll never sell my Bitcoin. Uh and then I start thinking like, okay, so then you're kind of saying like how are you gonna, get or use that value? Like are you gonna borrow against it? And then if you borrow against it, this is what my thought has been around a lot lately is if you borrow fiat against your Bitcoin, aren't we kind of enhancing or encouraging the fiat system to continue? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I kind of think it's smart, right, a little bit, because if we know that fiat is going down, if we know that, right, the money supply of fiat is just gonna keep rising, it's gonna keep depreciating, then I think it makes sense to at least be a little leveraged and, use that knowledge, right? If you can borrow an asset that's gonna go down in value and buy an asset that's gonna go up in value, I think that that's just smart, but I do worry about people becoming over leveraged, right? I don't I don't necessarily I don't really think it's, like, extending the fiat, like, I don't think it's, like, encouraging fiat activity, but, um, I do think yeah, I just think it's smart if you know one asset is gonna go down in value, right, to short it and buy into the asset that's gonna go up in value. I think naturally the market will get over leveraged because right, everybody sees what strategy is doing, all these companies that are they're using this convertible debt, but they're borrowing money and they're buying Bitcoin. But I think, you know, naturally, it's gonna lead to all these companies borrowing money or any entity borrowing money and buying Bitcoin, it's going to lead to the price going higher. And then as people get over leveraged, right, some people will get knocked out. It'll lead to like a crash at some point, but we'll still be at a higher price, right? Bitcoin could shoot up to like $400,000 and then it could crash back down to $200,000. But in the grand scheme of things, we're still moving higher. Um, so I don't really, yeah, I don't really worry about people like borrowing against their Bitcoin. I think it's smart. I think that just in general, it makes sense to be like smart about it and recognize when it's a good time to borrow. Um, how much to borrow, not getting too over leveraged. I really like just looking at the macro environment right now. I'm feeling pretty good because we're seeing the M2 money supply head back up. So I think that with that, Bitcoin should continue to move higher.
I was just looking at a bunch of indicators, and apparently there's a pretty strong correlation with, I think it's M2, and then it's like on a 6-month lag is the Bitcoin price. So that was pretty interesting. And I saw in one of your videos, I think you were looking at balances on exchanges. Are there any other metrics you kind of look at relatively closely to kind of? I mean, I think you're not really like trading it, I would say, but it seems like you look at some of these metrics.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of my favorites because at the end of the day, Bitcoin just is supply and demand. If more people are buying it, right, at this point, we're only getting 450 Bitcoin added to the circulating supply every day. So I check this Bitcoin balance on exchanges visual a lot and I see, oh, like 5,000 Bitcoin were eaten up today, right? I see, if I see the Bitcoin continuing to leave the market, right, where people can buy it, I think that that's a good sign that we're going to see Bitcoin moving to a higher price. The obviously the ETFs, right? You can also check on the ETF inflows and kind of see how much these ETFs are eating up. Um, Trying to think of what other metrics. I mean, to be honest, like that Bitcoin balance on exchange is one that I really follow a lot. Um, and then just looking at the macro environment, what's happening with the dollar. When we saw Bitcoin crash a couple of years ago, it was right when we went through this rate hike cycle, this very fast cycle, right? We saw the M2 money supply drop, and now we just got a cut from the Fed in September. It looks like we're going to get another Fed cut in October, according to Polymarket, which has honestly been a great resource for just kind of seeing what people are thinking is going to happen. Um, so I think though, I mean, I kind of look at ways where we're seeing Bitcoin demand and then like the Bitcoin balance on exchanges chart, and then I'm following the macro environment. Are we seeing the M2 money supply go up? So um, right now I'm seeing both, which is a good sign.
Okay. And how is that? How is the balances on exchange metric been tracking lately?
Oh, it's been great. It's been great.
Okay.
Ever since pretty much ever since we got the election result, uh, the you start to just see the balance, the Bitcoin balance on exchanges just heading lower pretty fast. Um, so the market was obviously pretty happy about the outcome of that election. Um, with this new administration being a little bit more pro Bitcoin. I'm a little bit more open to it. So, um, yeah, ever since we saw the election result, the Bitcoin balance on exchanges has just been heading down and the price has been heading up, which is great.
Cool. Uh, so are you projecting like a Are you predicting like a cycle high, like end of Q4 or somewhere in Q4? And then what are you thinking? Are we thinking down in 2026 to kind of keep with the 4-year cycle, or what are your views?
I'm curious what you think.
Well, I have to say I was quite swayed. I just recently read Bitcoin Super Cycle by Michael Turpin. I don't know if you read that one. That Michael Turpin believe was named like the godfather of crypto by CNBC a couple of years ago. Um but he was the first guy that I heard that seemed super bullish on Bitcoin but trades it. And he was showing how the cycle tops are actually pretty predictable in that 4 years, and he breaks it down into what he calls a 4 seasons model. So, like, spring would start at the halving, the summer would start when the prior all-time high is hit, and then the end of summer happens when the all-time high for that cycle hits, but you don't really know it until after the fact. And then he calls it like, fall ends at this like capitulation event, like an FTX type thing. During that down, he goes through the psychology of all of the good news getting ignored and all the bad news being like amplified. And that part really resonated with me. Also, like through going to the all-time high, it's kind of the reverse. The good news is getting amplified and all the bad news is just totally ignored. And I totally like jived with this because well, I lived I had I went through the 2014, 18 crashes already. In 2021, I remember the euphoria I was feeling and, I remember telling my mom, like, "I'm gonna be able to pay off my house, dude, and I'm gonna do all this stuff." Like, yeah, there's nothing gonna stop it. And then, of course, 2022 is a big piece of humble pie again. Um, so I think, and some of the stuff in that book was pretty compelling. So I have put on some further, like, option trades to, um just kind of played that all-time high coming Q4, and I'm kind of my base case is what we'll have down year in 2026, and I might take some off the table actually. But this would be the first time I've done that, and I've normally been someone not to really, like, sell their Bitcoin, but that book kind of turned me a little bit actually. Oh, it's an interesting book from someone who's so bullish on Bitcoin, but still trades it.
Yeah. I kind of think that I'm kind of in the camp that the cycle, like the sort of cyclical behavior is gonna end here. I mean, I still think we're gonna see, we're gonna see Bitcoin shoot up, we're gonna see Bitcoin shoot down, but I just think with the having the block reward now being a lot less, right, significant than it used to be, right? At like the first halving, we went from 50 Bitcoin to 25 Bitcoin. That's a huge drop, right? Now we're going to be dropping from like 3.125 Bitcoin at the next halving to like 1.5, 1.5, 1.6. Um, so I think that as the halvings continue, as we see the block reward continue to shrink and we're just seeing like you know, less Bitcoin entering the circulating supply, I think that the halvings are going to become, right? They're becoming a little bit less significant. Looking at why we saw that big crash in 2022, I believe, right after we saw the big run up. Um, I think it just mostly had to do with liquidity and the government basically just moving to a much tighter monetary policy. I see, we're now at a place where we're potentially going to see nation state demand in the next couple of years. The US has talked about potentially buying more Bitcoin. I'm sure other countries are thinking about it or have that, option on the table. Um, right? We're seeing all these companies starting to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And I know some people are like worried about this like mania of all these companies doing it, but if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? If Bitcoin just is better money and a better store of value, then every if you're an individual, a company, a government, any entity is going to be incentivized to hold it. Um, so, and I also just think like, right, if we are going to potentially be seeing nation state demand in the next couple of years, it's like, what's the next cycle after that, right? It's like, right, if the US government starts buying Bitcoin, um, what what's the next like big leap to go to, right? That's kind of it, right? If governments start accumulating Bitcoin, there's not a lot left out there. If you look at the Bitcoin balance on exchanges chart, there's only like 2 million Bitcoin out there for sale. And you could see large entities come in and swoop up a lot of that pretty quick. So I'm kind of in the camp that I mean, I'm just look I know we've seen the cyclical behavior in the past, but I'm just looking at continued demand. We know that Trump wants Powell out next year. Um, we could potentially get a new Fed chair who's gonna really propel assets even more. So for me, I just look at the macro environment being very good, and I see a lot of demand, and I think that for that reason, we probably should continue moving higher. Um, who knows? I mean, I think it's gonna be difficult for them to keep monetary policy tight just because of what we know, right? With this, like, credit-based system, the money supply has to keep rising. If it doesn't, credit starts to collapse, people start to default on their loans, and things fall apart. So yeah, I'm kind of in the camp that we're gonna move out of the cyclical behavior. Um, yeah.
If you were like pressed to give some like bearish type of scenarios or bearish cases like coming up, like what would you point to maybe? So,
I think there's always like, hmm, let's say the government, the Fed does keep monetary policy too tight, and I checked on Polymarket. It looks like we're due for people are projecting that we're going to see some more rate cuts. I think people are projecting that we're going to see QE, right? We haven't seen great demand in the US Treasuries market. I think people are thinking that the Fed is going to come in and, buy up some long-term US Treasury bonds at some point here. And that'll boost the money supply. But let's say the Fed doesn't, right? If they do try to keep things tight, we just got a rate cut. Maybe we see inflation shoot back up a little, and they decide to keep monetary policy tight. And because of that, maybe we see some credit collapse, right? We see some companies run into some problems with their debt. We know that when the stock market is usually heading down, or we're seeing, we're in a recessionary period, we could see Bitcoin crash with stocks. Bitcoin is very liquid, right? If people need money very quick, it's a lot easier to sell your Bitcoin than to sell a lot of other things. So I could potentially see in an environment where we do keep this tight monetary policy, I could see us having like a crash then boom scenario, right? Where kind of if we see credit collapse, Bitcoin could crash down a bit. And then we know the government will come in and provide liquidity to the market and boost Bitcoin back up. So that's like one scenario that I could see is a crash, then a pretty like big boom in the Bitcoin price. I think there's always you could always see a black swan event. I mean, there's over 1 million Bitcoin being held by Coinbase, right? If something ever happened to Coinbase, I think that that could lead to a pretty big Bitcoin crash. We saw what happened with FTX. And that's with any large holder, right? If there was ever some sort of hack, I think that could lead to a crash. Um, yeah, I mean, we saw last year that Germany sold a bunch of Bitcoin. Um, right? If we see large play, like a large nation state, maybe China, just decide to sell. I don't know why they would. But if we saw a large player just decide to sell a ton of Bitcoin, that can always lead to the price crashing down. But yeah, I feel like these things are just kind of hard to predict, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but there's always risks out there.
Yeah, thanks for spitballing those. So getting back to more like, I guess you personally. So like, I mean, you talked about how you were maybe not the best saver prior, and finding Bitcoin, your time preferences changed. Can you kind of talk through some of the decisions? Like, is it like maybe foregoing like coffee or a trip to save more Bitcoin, or like kind of like how is your mind working a little bit differently now?
To kind of like simplify it, I guess, I feel like anytime I just had this thought in the back of my mind, once I really understood how valuable Bitcoin was, like anytime I would go to buy something, it would be like, all right, do I really want to spend this 30 bucks? Or do I want to put this 30 bucks into Bitcoin? Because I know that it's probably going to be worth a lot more in a couple of years. And sure, I mean, right, I got in around 2020. I bought some when we were kind of like topping out around 60, 70 grand. And then when Bitcoin crashed down to under 30K, 20K, I was lucky that that was kind of around the time when I was like beginning to really understand Bitcoin, moving away from all that other crypto crap. And it was great because I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity right now, right? Like Bitcoin is on a crazy discount. And anytime I got a paycheck or anytime I had the opportunity to spend money, I would usually defer, just put it in the Bitcoin, you know? Um, so I think it just really made me question my spending a little bit, right? There was just always this thought in the back of my head. Um, right? Do I want to go to this concert? Do I want to pay $100 for this? Or I could just buy $100 worth of Bitcoin right now and watch my money grow. So I never like thought like that before Bitcoin. So that was definitely a big change for me. When um when did you get into Bitcoin? And like when was do you kind of have a similar thought as me like that?
Uh, I was introduced to Bitcoin in 2013 by an engineering friend. Um, so I bought a couple, and then I sold a little bit um, throughout the years, and then 2020 is really when I like really ramped up my spending. Right, in the beginning of lockdown, I remember being home, and I actually remember wanting to go out and buy more gold too, but there was no gold available. I couldn't get gold at any of the gold dealers. Because I kinda wanted, like, physically hold it,
Right.
and I liked gold a lot too, because I listened to Kiyosaki. I was listening to him a lot, and he's a big gold bug. Um, and but I remember during lockdown in the beginning of 2020, also buying a lot, and, I think it was I remember early on, like, in I think yeah, like 20, maybe 16, 17. I think I still had Litecoin. I can't even really tell you what Litecoin is, but I just remember hearing some more discussions. I'm like, "I'm out. I'm all in on Bitcoin in terms of these coins." Um, and for a long time, um, I just put a little bit in each month, and then in 2020, I was buying up chunks in the beginning, because I remember, I mean, the book that really changed my life was, oddly, The Shortest History of Germany, that that went through the Weimar hyperinflation. and I was like, "This feels like this might happen here." Or I know it's not likely, but, it's it feels like it could something like that's gonna happen. And, sure enough, they printed a bunch of money. So, yeah, um, and but I'd say I don't think I'm quite at, like, the maxi level because I have sold some of mine. Because like, if I see, like, there's an opportunity to, like, invest in myself in some way, I I I have done that in the past. Because I would like to think the return in myself will be higher even than Bitcoin. Maybe that's, like, overconfidence or whatever, but,
I think
I
that I
have
think that makes sense. I mean, yeah.
I will acknowledge that I have sold before, but,
All
uh
I've sold Bitcoin. Um, I think I mean, what's the point of having money if you never
right,
spend it, you know? I think,
exactly.
like you said, if it's like an investment in yourself, something that's gonna benefit your life, um for like last year, went to Europe for the first time. I think that was super beneficial to my life. Spent a good amount of Bitcoin to do that, but I think right in the grand scheme of things, what am I gonna do? Just never do anything? It's just sit on Bitcoin. So I would not say that I'm like a Bitcoin maximalist to the extent that I'm never gonna sell it. I definitely sell it sometimes. Yeah.
Mm. Cool. Well, Ian, it's been great having you on, and before we wind down, I do like to ask. I mean, you can take this as serious or jokingly as you want, but I asked everyone, "What's the best and worst personal finance advice you've either heard or received?"
Best best or worst?
But well, let's do and. So give me maybe start with the worst and let's save the best for last.
Hmm.
And when I say worst, maybe it's more so that like it's something that's echoed a lot, but you just don't believe. Like you think it's kind of nuts. Maybe.
Um, I guess like I don't know if this is gonna come off as controversial, but I just think with our traditional sort of savings culture, right? Everybody's got a 401k, everyone's got a retirement account. A lot of people are invested in government bonds. And personally, right, I think when you're growing up, everyone's like, you gotta do this stuff. But I do think there's just other ways to do things. Um, right? I mean, we've seen what's happened with gold over the past couple of years. I think people would probably, be better off, or I'd be better off holding like physical gold than investing in government government bonds. I personally choose to do things a little bit differently. Um, that's not to say that having a 401k is a bad thing, and there's great investments that you can make through like a traditional retirement account, but yeah, I mean, personally, I'm just not a big fan of like government bonds. Anybody who's told me to buy bonds, I'm just kind of like, no way. No way.
Okay.
I'm out. I'm betting on the future of the dollar, on making a long-term bet on the dollar that the dollar is gonna
Mhm.
hold its value over 20, 30 years. And then, I mean, I'm gonna keep it simple with the best investment advice I've received is buy Bitcoin. It's changed my life. It's simple. It gives you freedom. And yeah, it's changed. I feel like just fundamentally, it's changed the way I think about so many things, and it's given me a lot of freedom that I didn't have before. So, for all the people that told me to do that, I'm thankful.
Awesome. Well, Ian, it's been great having you on. Why don't you tell the listeners where they can go either get in contact with you or go watch your show?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel. It's called Learn About Bit. Should be able to find it. Just search it on YouTube. Also, I'm on socials, Instagram, TikTok. You could check me out on Noster. Are you on Noster?
I'm not.
No? Noster's
Get on those.
cooler. Yeah, I've really enjoyed Noster. It's just like a new sort of like fun social media, and all the Bitcoin people are on there. So, yeah, I'm on all the social media stuff. Check it out. I'd appreciate it.
Great. We'll have links to all that. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack.